And you could tell he looks over at Mike Portnoy and kind of laughs. And they share a little moment there on stage, kind of like, oh man, what the Hi everybody, it's Mike here from The Art of Guitar. I'm back with another concert review. I wasn't sure if I was going to do one for this Dream Theater concert, just because sometimes I just want to go to a show and enjoy it and, not really worry about remembering all the details and taking a ton of video footage. But as soon as I walked in, I knew that I wanted to share some of this footage with you guys and to share some of the things that I thought of as I was watching this concert. Because I've been a Dream Theater fan for a long time. I actually went through all my old ticket stubs the other day and I found one from 1992 and one from 94. And what's so crazy about that is the 92 show, Kevin Moore was still their keyboardist. And I'm a huge fan of that whole era of Dream Theater. When we watched him in 94 at this place called The Mirage, they had Derek Sheridan on keys. So I feel very fortunate that I was able to see Kevin Moore at least one time. Derek was awesome too, but it was just something special about seeing the OG, I got into Dream Theater because a local rock station here actually played Pull Me Under. It's so crazy to think that there was actually a time when radio stations would play bands like Dream Theater. They took chances back then, it was a different world for sure. They were even playing like Joe Satriani tunes at one point. It was a wild time. After hearing Pull Me Under, I asked my friend if he would take me to a place called Tidal Wave, where I bought a lot of CDs, and I ended up getting Images and Words, and I was so excited. We listened to it all the way home, and I got into Take the Time, Under a Glass Moon, and Metropolis. Those were the tunes that really struck me, because we thought, man, our older friends and our parents love like bands like Rush, and so did we, but they loved Rush. We were just kind of casual fans. But we finally felt like we had a Rush of our own with Dream Theater. I was kind of salivating as a guitar player hearing some of those chops, especially the solo in Under a Glass Moon. I wanted to learn that so bad, I actually went out a few weeks later and bought the tab book. I spent so much time trying to learn some of these licks, and some of them almost broke my hand. So it was kind of a no-brainer when my friend recently asked me to go see Dream Theater with him. This would be last week now. Of course I had to go. The concert was at the Orpheum Theater in Minneapolis and started at 8 p.m. And we got there in plenty of time, but we accidentally parked too far away. So we had sort of an interesting and somewhat tense trip all the way to the Orpheum Theater. Things are just crazy these days. But once we got there and walked in, it was a weird feeling. It felt like all of a sudden we were like part of a bigger family that we grew up with. Everybody was wearing concert t-shirts pretty much, like Queensryche and Rush t-shirts. I saw a couple Tool t-shirts. And there were a lot of people that actually knew the channel and would come up and we would take pictures and we'd talk a little bit. It was really cool. It did really feel like a family reunion of sorts. On the big billboard, it said that it's going to be featuring their new album. So I just figured it was in its entirety, basically. And then a change of seasons, which was really interesting because I'm a huge fan, like I said, of the older stuff. I'll talk about it a little bit more later. But a change of seasons is really where afterwards I sort of fell off of the Dream Theater train for a while. The train of thought, if you will. Now, I have to admit that I hadn't even heard the new album yet, so that was just going to be one big surprise to me. But I was very excited that Portnoy was back in the band. I love Mike Mangini. I even met him one time at a drum clinic where I worked before. But just Portnoy is the guy for Dream Theater. We all know that. I'm sure Mangini knows that too. Chris actually got us floor seats, so it was really great. We kept walking down the aisle all the way almost to the front. I think we were like 7 rows back or something like that, but excellent seating. We could see the stage perfectly. Actually, that whole theater, you could see the stage great from almost everywhere. As we were walking down the aisle, they started to play Tubular Bells over the PA system. And it freaked me out because, that's the theme song to The Exorcist. It's a great number, but it still gives me the creeps. So it put me in a certain mood right off the bat. After that, I think they played like the Halloween theme or something, maybe the theme from Psycho. So they were definitely going for this Halloween vibe. And I thought, a change of seasons always reminds me of fall. So I thought that's kind of perfect for this whole thing. And I looked and I saw that there was a bed on stage, like an unmade bed. And the whole thing was set up like a theater production, Makes sense. But they had like old school lampposts in the corner, and I felt like we were about to see Les Miserables or something, not Dream Theater. And in the back, they had this gigantic screen, which was going to do a lot of heavy lifting through the night. You're going to see in the footage. Right before they came out, I was wondering if anybody was going to stand up, because it's at a theater, it's going to be an album in its entirety. And I thought people would just sit down and kind of watch it like they're watching a movie or like a theater production, like I said. But as soon as they came out, our whole section stood up. The other side, half the people stayed sitting, but we all stood up. So it was just like, nope, this is going to be one of those concerts. And I felt bad because the lady behind me was kind of short and she couldn't see anything. So she ended up just sitting down for the whole concert. The first tune, I guess it's called In the Arms of Morpheus, was a great way to kick off the show because it's intense, it was super heavy, and it sounded like John Petrucci and John were tuned down to like drop A or something, like a 7-string type sound. The stage just came to life, the lighting was perfect. They had these really cool smoke cannons that would shoot smoke straight up, but they also had LEDs inside of them, so it looked great every time they went off. And they had the lasers that I wish Def Leppard would have had at their last concert that I just saw. I did a review for too. The green lasers that shoot out and spread out with the fog, it looks so cool. And they would change colors too. They weren't just green. Back in the old days, they had just one color, but now they can do crazy stuff. Mike Portnoy's kit looked gigantic. It looked like 4 regular drum sets put together. I tried to count the cymbals, but I lost track after like 25, so I'm not sure how many there were. But it was so big, in fact, that he had 2 different drum thrones that he would sit on for different songs. Then they kicked into Night Terror, which is the second tune on their new album. So James LaBrie comes out, and I was hoping that he was going to come out of the bed somehow. I thought that would be hilarious, like some crazy visual illusion where all of a sudden he pulls the covers off and he jumps out of the bed. But that never happened. I always wondered what James LaBrie does backstage because he's always running off and on stage. I wonder if he goes back and like watches TV or gets a throat massage or what the hell he's doing. I don't know. Maybe interpretive dancing. On our way to the show, Chris is actually listening to Wasp because he was trying to figure out if Blackie Lawless was singing to, basically lip syncing to backing tracks. And I didn't think he was. I thought maybe Blackie Lawless is just that good, because he sounds so good live. And then Chris is like, no, this is a recent concert. And he still sounded like he was 24, And that reminded me of the only thing I was really concerned about was James LaBrie's singing, because some people were kind of talking, are they using tracks? Is his voice holding up? What's going on? So I wasn't sure what to expect, but when he came out and started to sing, Chris was just like, wow, he sounds really great. And I agreed. But I also realized he's singing great in the new stuff, and he tones it down a little bit. His pitches aren't way up here for the newer stuff. So I thought, what's going to happen if they play maybe like an old track, maybe towards the end of the show or something, maybe for an encore. But then I also wondered if he was going to be able to even hit those high notes that he used to be able to hit, because those early tunes are so insanely high. So I was really happy to see that he seemed to be in really good voice that night. I look over and Jordan Rudess is back there with his crazy keyboard. The front actually had this LED screen that curved around, and it would show all these different visuals, and sometimes it would even show a piano key, like an animated piano key setup, and it would play along with whatever he was playing. It would also spin, of course, and he could tilt it like this so you could watch him play. Typically, if I see a band and they're playing songs I don't know, I tend to get a little bit bored. I'll still watch and enjoy it, but I'm not as connected as I would be. It's almost like watching a really great movie that's in a different language.
Tout ne vous servez pas de toilette.
But luckily with Dream Theater, it's easy as a musician to engage even if you haven't heard the song before. Because what my brain was doing, it was trying to keep track of all the time signatures. So I'm kind of bobbing my head, and then it's like, oh, this is 7/8. Kind of hard to bob your head to 7/8, But it was a fun little challenge, and it kept me engaged in the show. There was so much to see, the visuals on the screen. And just watching the musicians themselves is going to draw you in, of course. Petrucci's guitar tone was thick as like his biceps and his beard. That guy lifts. Him and LaBrie both look like they're gym buddies or something. I didn't see any amps on the stage, but actually John Petrucci's monitors, I believe they were just regular stage monitors, had Mesa Boogie labels on them. And Chris said he thought it was because he must have like an endorsement deal. So because the amps aren't on the stage, they have to have their logo somewhere. So put them on the monitors. It's a good idea, actually. Some of his slower solos were so musical and magical, it reminded me of like a David Gilmour type of playing. It was very captivating. Like they had the fog machine behind him going up, and it was like a blue setting, I think, and it was just perfect. It all felt and looked exactly like some kind of dream. What's cool about Dream Theater is they don't shy away from promoting their influences. They even kicked into Metallica's Wherever I May Roam once during the song, one of the other songs actually, and it was cool because they did it just real quick and then got out of it. So they just kind of did a little nod to Metallica there. And there are parts where it sounds like a Tool song. There's parts, like I said, Pink Floyd. So yeah, they're a very awesome sum of all their influences, plus their own thing, of course. During this part, it's the first time that I saw Mike Portnoy actually have to concentrate. Like, you could tell he was really focusing on what he was doing, trying to be really in sync with John Petrucci. I had to laugh because I told Chris, I'm like, this is the first time I think he's actually, focusing, which means everything else in the concert was like easy for him. He'll even do his patented yawn, while he's drumming, just to kind of, show off that this is nothing, man. That kind of twists the knife in all this other musicians that are just like, man, I wish I could do half of what that dude's doing. This would be the fourth time I've seen Dream Theater live, and almost all the times when we see them, it's the same story with John Mayung's bass tone. He's playing amazing stuff, but a lot of it is just gone in the mix. Like, I couldn't hear it where we were sitting. But when I went up the aisle to go to the bathroom, I could suddenly hear him. So I think it's where we were sitting this time. But later on in the show, when Petrucci goes into a lot of clean sound stuff, then you could hear the bass really well, and it sounded great. The tone was awesome, but unfortunately, the really fast syncopated parts where he plays with John, sometimes it gets so buried that if he stopped playing altogether, it's almost like you wouldn't be able to tell in certain parts. They brought out this gunslinger looking thing. It was kind of funny because I had just seen a couple of bands that had huge inflated props as well. One of them that I think was the most impressive was actually Creator. Couldn't believe it when the curtains went down and these crazy looking demon statues were looking down at us. That was epic. And then Amon Amarth had some great looking ones too. So this gunslinger wasn't as impressive, but it was pretty cool because the eyes lit up red. It was really comic booky. I felt really proud for the band. I know that sounds kind of weird, but to be around for that many years, to have those lineup changes happen, but still put out album after album, and remembering what they were like in 92 and 94, they just seem like kids now that I watch old video of it. And then to see them live again after all these years, they're right in front of us on this incredible looking stage. You just think of how they all made music their livelihoods. They made it. It's also funny to contemplate how many notes collectively that band has played over the years. I bet you it's in the billions by now. I don't know. So I could tell they were coming to the end of their album, so I thought it'd be a really good time, since I didn't really know the songs anyway, to run out and try to get a t-shirt. So I ended up getting this one. It's the least fancy one they had. I found that the more printing is on the shirt, the less comfortable it is for me. So I got this one that has just a little patch on it, and then on the back it has all the tour dates, and you would not believe how long this freaking tour is. Isn't that crazy? It's like spanning years. It's almost like Metallica's Black Album tour. So the band comes back out and they play As I Am, The Enemy Inside, and Panic Attack. It was brutally awesome. Followed by a couple of acts from Scenes from a Memory, which is an album I actually did listen to, back when my students were really into it. I gave it a decent amount of spins, if you will, but still I didn't grab onto it the way I would grab onto like Awake. I'll never forget working at a music store back when Awake first came out. They sent a promo CD first, and it was for Lie, and I couldn't stop listening to it. I just love that riff. Because I was in charge of the music when I worked there, I played it nonstop. So I think I turned a lot of people on to Dream Theater. They'd walk in and be like, who is this? Is this Rush or something? Like, no, Dream Theater, check it out. You could wield a lot of power back then if you ran the CD player at the store. Then they kicked into Peruvian Skies, and then for us old schoolers, they played Take the Time. And I literally got a chill feeling, because I'm like, yes. I didn't know if they were going to play anything off Images and Words or Awake, and at least they're doing Take the Time. So they kick into the tune, and then Mike Portnoy actually sings a lot of the first part of the song.
You still out there, Minneapolis? Wait a minute.
And I looked back because I didn't remember him doing that back when I saw him live. And it turns out he started doing that around like 98. So it's nothing new, but it was kind of new and shocking to me. And then James LaBrie comes in on one of the higher parts of the tune. And this is the first time I heard him really struggle in the night. You could tell it just isn't in his wheelhouse anymore to hit those crazy notes that he did way back in time. But like a pro, he got through it. He had the audience singing certain parts. He would modify things if he had to. He hit a few flat notes, but this always happens. Whenever I see a band live, I don't really notice it or really care because I'm so excited about the whole situation. And then if I see a playback of it the next day, then I can really hear it. It's a common thing for us musicians. Like, I'll play a show and record it, and I'll like have a great show. But the next day I'll listen back and be like, oh God, I wish I never heard that. But it does push you to want to get better for the next show. So I guess there's that. So even though Labrie had his moments of struggle, I'd much rather have that happen than have like a Blackie Lawless situation where he's singing to backing tracks that he recorded back when he was in his 20s, you know? That's no shade on Blackie. You know, I'm a huge fan of him and Wasp, but yeah, that's just something he openly admits. Speaking of hiccups, I noticed with John Petrucci, he was pretty much flawless the whole night. But the only time I noticed any discrepancies was during Take the Time, which is kind of funny because it's one of their oldest tunes. They've been playing it the longest, you know? But there's some parts where he was kind of rushing ahead. And before that song, he was like tuning and stuff. It was weird. He was tuning at the headstock, and I thought maybe he would have locks. So I thought maybe that's kind of weird. Like he should be tuning down by his bridge. But I'll have to do some research. Maybe he doesn't put locks up at the nut. I don't know. So he had some tuning thing happen and then the rushing the lick, and then he goes to hit his pedal and he accidentally shuts off his distortion for a second. But like the seasoned pro he is, you know, right away he clicks it back on, and you could tell he looks over at Mike Portnoy and kind of laughs, and they share a little moment there on stage, kind of like, oh man, what the But that's the extent of what I would call a bad moment for John Petrucci. That's how high level he is, you know? It's crazy because after Take the Time, I felt completely satiated. I'm like, man, am I getting Chris's money's worth? But I completely forgot that they were still going to play A Change of Seasons. It totally left my brain. Before they did, though, they played a full clip of the movie Dead Poets Society, which is one of my favorite movies. And it's cool because in the song A Change of Seasons, they actually use a sample from it. And I wondered if the younger fans of Dream Theater there were like, oh, that's where they got that sample from some old movie from like the 40s. I'm just kidding, but to them it probably seemed that old. The weird part of A Change of Seasons, I remember buying the CD and loving it. But the second half of it is all covers or like medleys of covers. So I wondered if they were going to kick into one of those tunes. I wouldn't mind hearing Dream Theater play A Funeral for a Friend, but they did not do any of that stuff. And then Jordan came out with a keytar, which was hilarious because he has the same model of keytar that I have. Here, I'll show you. Look at this thing. Look at it. So playing the keytar allowed him to walk out in front of the stage, and he had his shades on and he's just ripping this crazy lead and just looking like a rock star. People were reaching up towards him, and all I could think was, Jordan, leave some pussy for the rest of us, dude. As the concert neared the end, I could tell that the whole crowd was very satisfied, and almost to the point where it was like too much stimulation for people. Maybe I'm just kind of projecting my own feelings to everybody, but it felt like with all those visuals to look at, all the sounds, a billion notes hitting your ears, and just like the nostalgia of it all, it was just one of those things where it was kind of overwhelming. I think I just spit right there. Did you see that? But when it finally came to an end, everybody stood up and, you know, showed their love to the band. And somehow Mike Portnoy was instantly in a robe. But I think he walked off, threw the robe on, walked to the front. They all kind of stood together. They took a picture from the drum cam point of view, and then they turned around and bowed out, and that was the end of it. Overall, I would say I'm more than satisfied with the show, and it was well worth the ticket price, especially because I didn't have to pay for it. If I had my way, I would have loved to have heard songs off of Awake and, you know, even maybe Yetzi Jam. I don't know how to pronounce that, but that's one of the tunes that forced me to have to buy When Dream and Day Unite. It's one of the most badass tunes. Check it out if you haven't heard it before, but if you're a big fan, I'm sure you have heard it. And of course, to hear Pull Me Under, Metropolis, I know I sound like a poser, but those are the ones that I grew up loving. So I promised to listen to Parasomnia all the way through at least once, give it a chance, let it settle for a little bit, but I could already tell that I want to run back and listen to some old Awake tunes like Caught in a Web, 6 O'Clock, Space Dive Vest. That song got me through so many tough times. There's so many emotional ties to that album for me. Okay, everybody, thank you for watching. Thanks again to my friend Christopher for buying me the ticket. It's always cool to see shows with you, and I look forward to the next one. I'm not sure what it's going to be, but I know I'm going to see Paul McCartney with my nephew soon, so that should be mind-bending. Okay, everybody, catch you later. Thanks again for watching. Bye-bye.